Okay, I'd like to now welcome our next speaker, Devin Liddell, Teague's principal brand strategist. In this role, he leads the brand strategy offer for design consultancy Teague, working collaboratively with clients such as Anheuser-Busch, InBev, the Boeing Company, Intel, JW Marriott, Microsoft, and SC Johnson to create research-driven brand strategies and consumer experiences. With more than a decade of experience in brand strategy and design, Devin has worked across a broad spectrum of industries: aerospace, higher education, software, technology, food and beverage, and retail. What does that leave? This morning's closing session is set to inspire with a detailed prototype of the airline of the future. Let me check it out. Join me in welcoming Devin. Thank you.
All right, good morning, and thank you for having me here. I'm excited to show you what we've been up to for the last 4 or 5 months. I won't say much beyond about Teague beyond what will be covered here on this first slide, other than to say that Teague is Boeing's longtime design partner. Many of you probably know us from that capacity. We also do a lot of work with Google and Microsoft and Samsung and Intel and other high-tech companies. The reason I mention that is that actually sort of uniquely positions us to do exactly what I'm going to cover today, which is to envision the airline of the future. Also, if you have questions or commentary as we go forward, my Twitter handle at Devin Liddell and also the Teague Twitter handle at Teague1926 is up there. So feel free to share your commentary throughout today. So to jump into it. As I mentioned, we started this project about 4 or 5 months ago, and from the very beginning, we wanted to do one thing in particular. We wanted to anticipate disruption. And the reason we wanted to anticipate disruption is we wanted to see what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of what will an airline of the future actually do within 5 to 10 years, not so that we could start up an airline, though it'll look like we actually did, but instead to figure out how could airlines operating today replicate those practices. Because if we don't start replicating those practices now, it will be too late when we get to them. Also, we wanted to focus on 2 things. We wanted to anchor all of our work to business realities. We wanted to anchor our work to better experiences and better profitability. This couldn't be simply a blue sky exercise where design teams piled into rooms and imagined what if this, what if that. We always wanted them to track back to actually better business metrics and better passenger experiences. There's a lot of room for both of those. So I want to introduce you to Poppy. Poppy is the nickname we developed for this airline of the future. And I wouldn't normally dwell on the logo per se, but I will call out here that the actual logo, we wanted to be very tech-centric from the start. And if you take a close look at this logo for Poppy, you'll actually notice that the logo itself is comprised of ones and zeros. We wanted this airline to be very code-centric. There's a lot of room for us to do new and amazing things through technology, and Poppy is going to be at the forefront of that. So we're not flying today, but we will be flying soon. I want to show you the 3 principles that we considered as a startup. When we started this project, we wanted to be in startup mode. So we wanted to come up with the 3 principles that inspired everything we do. And the reason this is important to mention, actually, is that a lot of airlines presently are missing these principles. There's been a lot of merger and acquisition activity, in particular when it comes to airlines. And there actually is a dilutive effect when it comes to foundational beliefs when it comes to merger and acquisition activity. When you think about the effect of merger and acquisition activity, there is a cost when it comes to passenger experience. There is an inverse correlation between Skytrax's passenger preference rankings and the number of mergers and acquisitions an airline has gone through. And the reason I mention that is not to say that if you've had a lot of merger and acquisition activity that all is lost, but instead to refocus on what are those foundational beliefs that inspire everything you do as an airline. What are those ideas that are the touchstones that guide everything you do from operations to passenger touch points and so forth? And we wanted to do that from the very beginning. The first one is love over loyalty. And I use these words pretty specifically. Loyalty in the airline industry is mostly a myth. I am loyal to Alaska Airlines. They were up here earlier on the stage. I'm also loyal to Southwest sometimes, especially when I go visit my in-laws. I'm also loyal to Emirates and sometimes even to British Airways. Most people have 3 or 4 airlines that they are in some way loyal to. That said, most people don't actually have an airline that they are in love with. And love is the higher order that we're after here. When you look at the Brand Finance Rankings, which is an organization that measures brand valuation, when you look at the most recent rankings, you actually won't see an airline until nearly 200. Of the top 500 brands in the world, you won't see an airline until nearly 200. There is a lot of room for us to grow when it comes to inspiring passenger love for our brands. And if you want to know what I'm talking about when it comes to love, love is actually a very illogical behavior. And if you watch people wait in line for an Apple iPhone that will be there 4 hours later, that doesn't make sense. But it is a measure of love. And that love doesn't currently exist in our industry, but there is lots and lots of room to get there. So what do I mean by love over loyalty? One is solve the small problems that feel big. And this is a really, really important one from a design standpoint, from an experience design standpoint. When you think about what happened with Uber, Uber fixed 2 problems within the cab process. They fixed 2 things. They fixed dispatch, and they also fixed payment. And by fixing 2 problems that were small, but that felt big for ground transportation users, they upended an entire industry. So there's lots of room to solve the small problems that feel big, and I'm going to dwell on one in particular here shortly. The other one is trade in emotional currencies. The airline industry currently, we are trading in functional currencies. We are trading in fares and timetables and routes and miles and points. But we are not trading in the emotional currencies that drive other brand categories forward. We're not trading yet in the emotional currencies of wonder and awe and comfort and assurance and confidence, all those emotional currencies that go back to what I said about love, that get people to love a brand. Not to be loyal to a brand, but to love a brand. The other one is make the brand ownable. If you actually were to park yourself outside of a shopping mall, really anywhere in the world, you could tell what brands those people owned inside their hearts, what brands they sort of internalized as their own, simply by watching them leave the shopping mall. If you do the same thing outside of any airport, you are hard-pressed to figure out which brands they were just a part of. What brand did they just get off of when it comes to their flight? Without a close reading of their luggage tags or that thermal paper, you'd be hard-pressed to know which one that is. So there's a lot of room in terms of how we can make the brand ownable. So, particularly when it comes to solving the small problems that feel big, there's been a lot of industry hand-wringing around cabin luggage. In fact, this past summer was a sort of a flashpoint for this issue with the Cabin OK initiative from IATA. Also, for those of you who saw some coverage of the aircraft that had an engine catch fire in Las Vegas, unfortunately, some of you might have noticed that actually there was photographs of people taking their luggage down the evacuation slides. Baggage, cabin luggage, causes a lot of problems for us. Cabin luggage also earns us a lot of money. It earned us $32 billion in bag fees alone last year. But make no mistake, bag fees, this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Bag fees are a fine for doing business with us. Yes, they're great for our revenue, but it cannot be the future of our revenue. And the answer to how we should address cabin luggage is not about sizing requirements. It's not about locking bins in the event of an emergency. The answer to this problem is actually really, really straightforward. At least that's what we believe from Poppy's standpoint. The answer is no cabin luggage. There is a future in front of us where this would be the way to go. And as was mentioned earlier, if you look back, this is a shot of a Boeing 707. And what you'll see actually are the presence of mainly hats in the bin spaces, right? There are no giant rollaboard bags here. There's nothing that would have clogged TSA in this era if it had existed. It's mostly hats. And a lot of people look at this as sort of the golden era of flying. So Poppy's response to both the present-day problem and also looking back on this is this. This is a Fedora bin. And a Fedora bin does not hold cabin luggage. There is no cabin luggage aboard a Poppy aircraft. There is only space for personal goods. There's only space for your laptop bag or a hat, as I mentioned with Fedoras, or maybe your jacket. Look what happens to the cabin environment when we use Fedora bins. When there is no giant bin there for our rollerboard bags, we open up the cabin entirely. This is not, by the way, a skylight. This is actually an LED lighting concept as well for what we could do inside the cabin 5 to 10 years from now using lighting technologies that are being developed right now. From a metric standpoint, the Fedora bin would deliver this. Fedora bins in place of existing bins on board a 777 would remove nearly 4,000 pounds from a cabin architecture. And I'm not, by the way, just to be really, really clear, I'm not talking about games we play between whether the bag, someone's carry-aboard bag, is below or above. I'm talking about actual weight when it comes to the cabin architecture. A Fedora bin would remove 4,000 pounds from that. If we were the largest operator of 777s in the world, and we're not yet, but Emirates, we're coming for you. If we were to do that, that would save us $25 million in fuel savings alone. And the last one is really, really important. You can tell how conflicted we are as an industry about bags through these initiatives. We love the fees they generate, but we also hate how much they slow down our boarding process. If we move to this idea of a Fedora bin, we actually would increase the speed of boarding by as much as 71%. That has a huge cost implication when you think about the financial impacts of lost connections. That said, we know that there are some people who have to have their bag on board. They will reject the idea of not being able to bring a bag on board, particularly business class travelers. So there's an opportunity on board Poppy to create an entirely new class of within the aircraft, and that is Click class. And this starts to speak towards the whole idea of making the brand ownable. So this is custom designed luggage designed by Poppy for users of Click class. And you can see here the bag, what you don't see is its RFID tag, but the bag itself clicks into a bay for the aisle seat for which it's designed. And that RFID tag will only match that bag to that aisle seat. So for people who won't be able to not check a bag, Click class is a perfect way for us to cement our relationship to them through this customized luggage. You actually can see as a small detail on the design side, the presence of the Poppy logo in the caster wheel, for us to make the brand ownable for those people, to start connecting them in an emotional way. That is just the start of how we want to brand beyond the plane. And this is an area that, for me, as was mentioned in my intro, this is really, really important to me. I am fundamentally a brand person. And one of the things that sort of startles me is that there's clearly a desire from passengers for airlines to behave as lifestyle brands. And if you want any proof of this, just go into a Pan Am store in SeaTac or any other airport. People buy Pan Am branded merchandise in these retail stores for an airline that does not exist any longer. The flying public wants airlines to slot into this position as lifestyle brands. Airlines do extraordinary things. And going back to what I mentioned earlier about that whole brand finance rankings, above that 200 mark, where you see that first airline, you see the likes of accounting firms and old telco and soda and diapers, things that can't hold a candle to us in terms of what we deliver to passengers on an everyday basis. So there's a lot of opportunities to brand beyond the plane and to create, again, those branded artifacts that make the brand ownable. And these are just a few of them, right? So if you start to think about what business we could move into to create these branded artifacts that people would actually want. As a total aside, by the way, and Rajan mentioned this, I've done a lot of work in many different categories. One of the categories I have a lot of experience in is consumer banking, believe it or not. And for those of you who remember ING Direct, they've recently been acquired by Capital One, but ING Direct used to produce branded artifacts similar to this that they initially intended as swag, stuff that they would just give away to people. And instead what happened was people requested to purchase them. So they started actually making a little tiny little business selling ING Direct T-shirts and water bottles and messenger banks. This is for a bank. This is a bank, and people want to do this. The same thing happened within our industry, by the way, with Air Baltic. Air Baltic started designing Air Baltic shoes and Air Baltic, even the brand of Mini Cooper and so forth, and passengers requested to purchase them. They want to buy them, and yet we are not producing them. So Poppy is going to absolutely be in the business of developing these types of artifacts. The second principle here at work is know the journey. And what I mean by knowing the journey is it's all about offering contextual guidance, understanding where people are in the flying experience, and then designing experiences for them within those specific experiences in particular. That means designing for the seams. Right now, one of the words that will really get me whipped into a froth is the word seamless. Seamless is a fantasy. Seamless does not exist, and it's missing the point. Seamless is not what we're after. We are actually after the seams themselves. Those in-between moments within the larger experience have wonderful, wonderful opportunities to do extraordinary things and to make people fall in love with us. And yet we are chasing seamless, which will never happen. We should be chasing the seams, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Second one is operate with transparency, and this came up earlier. But if you want any proof point about how there's room for greater transparency, all you have to do is watch a group of passengers at a gate asking each other what row is boarding now. Right? There's a lot more opportunity for us to deliver greater transparency in terms of letting people know what's happening right now and what's happening next. And the last one is right-sizing interactions. And what we mean by right-sizing interactions is balancing what tech does really well and what humans do really well. And this will be an increasingly important tension that we're going to have to reconcile from a design standpoint moving forward. Because there is a tendency to want technology to do everything. Technology doesn't do everything really well. There are things that humans do really well. I was recently, over the summer, I was on board an Iceland Air flight. I don't know if Iceland Air is here or not, but I was on board an Iceland Air flight. There was some significant turbulence, and I watched an Iceland Air attendant soothe a spooked passenger, and it took my breath away. They did it so expertly and with so much care. It was amazing. There is no app for that. There isn't an app for that. But there is an app for lots of other things, and there's plenty of other things that we actually do from a human standpoint that would be much better accomplished through technology, and I'll talk about that in a second. So here, this is actually something that's already in play, particularly in Asia, a distributed bag drop. It's also widely common in Europe when it comes to European rail, but this is something we also need to grow into. Figuring out ways to liberate people from those bags I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to show you the whole journey of the bag in a way. We need to figure out ways to liberate them from those bags earlier because they don't want to have them with them anyway. So how do we start to spread these seams apart a bit more to make more optimal experiences? Also, when I talked about bags earlier, look what happens to a gate when a gate is liberated from all these bags. Not to go on too long about bags, but bags are ruining the gate experience too. If you think about sort of a standard configuration of 5 seats and a 5-seat row when it comes to an airport waiting area, there's only typically about 2 people sitting in that row because their bags are sitting with them there as well. Bags are ruining and compromising our gate experience as well. So what happens when you liberate the gate experience from that as well? Here you're looking at digital signage where you actually get to see, again, contextual guidance about what's happening. Your click class is now boarding on this. There's no dueling audio announcements happening inside the gate. This is all happening from a digital signage standpoint. In a lot of ways, what we found out when we were engaged in this project was that so much of what we're after here is actually sort of the future of the airline app, if you will. Here you're looking at the app interacting with the passenger to let them know that how long do they have before their zone is now boarding? And is it boarding right now? You could also imagine a future where this type of technology interfaces with even other parts of the airport experience, where you have a smart table at Chili's, if you will. I love Chili's, and they have awesome blossoms and so forth, but I'd love it if their table was also smart and told me when my zone is boarding as well. That bag I mentioned earlier in terms of checking it, the app will also let you know when it's ready to pick up. And this is the end of baggage carousels. Baggage carousels are giant space-hogging monoliths that exist in airports, really for hub-and-spoke travel of bags. Passengers have told us that they want to fly point to point, and yet we really sort of still let bags travel hub and spoke. We re-queue up and re-queue up and re-queue up bags only for them to be distributed at a carousel at the end. There's a lot more work here to be done, but if as a good corollary in terms of how other industries are tackling this, Amazon and DHL already have a pilot working right now that will deliver Amazon packages to your car trunk. The technology for distributed bags or distributed bag check, whether that's in an Amazon locker, whether that's a transit locker, whether that's your car trunk, wherever it goes, that technology already exists now, and we'll need to embrace that in the next 5 to 10 years especially, which is really realized by this next slide, which I'll show you. This is where bags should go most of the time, straight to the hotel. And I talked about this a couple years ago, but when we think about what we're doing from a bag fee standpoint, we are collecting that bag fee. We are not adding value for what we do with that bag once we have it. This is a portrait of how we could start to add value that, again, would get people to love us in a way that they currently don't love us right now. That bag should be dropped off at a transit station, if you're on a business trip, or via the check stand, and then you will not see that bag again until you arrive at your hotel. All of that's delivered through transparency, of course, through the app. The app tells you, your bag is here, your bag is there, your bag has been loaded on board, your bag is in transit, your bag has now been delivered to your hotel. That is the emotional currency I mentioned earlier of assurance that we're currently not delivering on either. I mentioned right-sizing interactions. Having food and beverage done on demand is a great way of right-sizing those interactions. Just now there was the commentary about people using the lavatories. There's really fascinating research that shows that if you have on-demand food and beverage services, people use the restrooms less, which I won't dwell on too long, but it's really, really fascinating, right? What's that sort of at the center of that is that people take food and beverage from galley carts that they perhaps don't want. Is there instead another opportunity to let people pick out food and beverage items that they actually really do want and to generate ancillary revenue from that experience, right? And to go back to what I said about attendants, and in particular that attendant who was so expert in soothing that troubled passenger, you can make a really, really sound argument that experienced attendants should not be handing out food and beverage. That is not their best use of their talents. They could be used in other ways. They could be put forward in other ways that don't involve handing out ginger ale and peanuts. The last one, and this is the last principle, is membership matters. And the question this principle asks is the fare-centric model really working? Is it really working the way we want it to work? And what we did from a Poppy standpoint was to look at what happens when you introduce membership from a layered standpoint. Is there a way for us to inspire buy-in from a brand standpoint? I am a Starbucks customer, and I have a Starbucks card, and I'm going to talk about the Starbucks cards here in a second, but I have a Starbucks card. When I get off my train stop and I travel the 8 or 9 blocks on foot before I arrive at the Teague studio, I work in Seattle, so there's a lot of coffee shops. I probably pass 30, maybe 40 individual cafes, and I ignore them all because I have bought into Starbucks, and more importantly, depending on how you look at it, I have opted out of the competition. So are there ways we can use membership to opt out of the competitive landscape? Are there ways that we can use membership also to invite participation? We don't do a particularly fantastic job currently of inviting passengers to participate in the brand. Yes, we let them fill out reviews. Yes, we listen to them and so forth. But there aren't a lot of ways that they participate in ways that they are participating in other categories. And I'll talk about that in a second. Another one is to share the future. And what I mean by share the future is to, again, move beyond the fare-centric model of I'm buying a fare for this time and place, and then when it comes to my next fare purchase, all bets are off. Is there a way to create a long-term relationship that's not based on miles and points? We did a lot of digging into business models, and one of the business models that we found ourselves really fascinated with was what was going on in sports. Sports leagues around the world make a lot of money. They are very, very rich. They do a lot of revenue using very few employees. One of the things we noticed from sports leagues, though, was a really interesting trick. It's maybe not a trick, but it seems like a trick in some ways. They get people to buy a season's worth of seats before those games ever happen. Sometimes it's more than a calendar year in advance. That's really remarkable. That's a really remarkable thing. The other thing is that those same leagues well, not all of them, 6 out of 10 of the largest sports leagues in the world, including the NFL and Major League Baseball, operate ticket exchanges. So they've sold those season ticket memberships to those season ticket holders, and then when those season ticket holders, for some reason, need to sell those seats they can't make it to, they sell them on board or via a league-run ticket exchange, and the league takes a 10% typically commission on those resales. They are selling the tickets twice. And it adds value to everyone involved, both the buyers of the tickets, the sellers of the tickets, and the league itself. That is really fascinating. But this isn't limited, by the way, just to the sports leagues. Membership models are emerging everywhere we go. Starbucks, you don't think about it being a membership model, but it's a membership model. Starbucks makes 8% of its corporate profit on interest income. Interest income, again, comprises 8% of total profit. This is largely due to the billions, and yes, it is billions of dollars loaded onto payment platforms. Their payment platforms, mainly the card. Amazon, people don't think of Amazon being as a membership model either. Amazon is roughly a membership model as well. 53%, roughly 53% of Amazon customers are also Prime members. And those Prime members spend about half as much more than non-Prime members. So they are also an emerging membership model. So are there ways that we can do this? This is a very basic equation. The point of this is not the equation. This is the equation we decided to come up with, or that we explored in terms of figuring out, are there ways we could start to tier memberships according to what people wanted out of the travel experience? What type of traveler were they? How often they travel? What class they travel? Who do they travel with? The point of this, and it pales in comparison to what your analytics and data teams will do with this. You have fantastic data around who's flying and why they're flying. All of that data could be absolutely employed to figure out what are the optimal membership levels for those flyers. And is there a way to get those people to, instead of, again, being fare-centric in their relationship with us, to be member-centric? So here you're actually seeing, when you think about inviting participation, this is actually a ticket exchange prototype. So this is a ticket exchange prototype for Poppy, watching people buy and sell tickets to where they're going and where they're coming from in real time. On the front of inviting participation as well, this is the app demoing how people would actually trade seats. I know there was someone from Intel here earlier. I think they're probably still here. But we did a project with Intel called the Billboard Project, and it was a dual-facing laptop. So it has a screen on the outside and a screen that faced the user. And one of the user case scenarios that people were really fascinated about was, could I signal at an airport gate, could I signal that I wanted to trade seats, that I wanted to trade an aisle seat or a window seat? So that's this use case scenario brought to the app itself. We also wanted to do more for the middle. The middle seat is, unfortunately, sort of this abandoned area. It's suboptimal We all admit it's suboptimal, but we don't price it in a suboptimal way. Going back to sports, as I mentioned earlier, if you bought a obstructed vision seat at a stadium, you would pay less for it. A lot of times people, because of the way the pricing works, people sometimes have the middle seat because they actually booked late, but they paid more than someone who was on the aisle or window. So we wanted to reposition the middle seat in a more value-added way. And onboard Poppy aircraft, for the airline of the future, middle seats are not middle seats. Middle seats are repositioned as promotional class. And this is where we're bringing brands on board into the cabin to deliver unique experiences that only they can deliver. In this scenario, it is Uniqlo, right? So in this scenario, we've partnered with Uniqlo to be the promotional partner for the middle seat. This could just as easily be Xbox or Nike or Adidas or any number of brands, Fiat. It could be any number of brands that would partner with us from a co-making standpoint. So here's, in this scenario, you are in the Uniqlo promotional class, and if you're on board a flight to Seattle, you might get a nice rain jacket from Uniqlo. We don't use umbrellas, so there's no umbrellas on board that. That paves the way for rethinking classes entirely, and classes based on experiences rather than our current paradigm of seat pitch and width. Right now, seat pitch and width is roughly the only distinction between classes. Could we instead start thinking about things like this, which is cinema class? And I'll be curious to know what Paramount and the other studios think about this. But this is the middle 3 seating subsection on board a 777 with curtains on the side that has been redesigned as cinema class. I love IFE systems. IFE systems are awesome. That said, they are typically 12 inches. So could we actually deliver something where people would pay more to be on board cinema class? So to close up, love over loyalty, know the journey, and membership matters. 3 principles with very clear design expressions that you've just seen. They deliver fantastic operating and financial benefits. Better interest and ancillary income is a big one, right? So if we can convince passengers to be with us for the long term, to pre-purchase tickets in advance, almost a year in advance, that presents opportunities for interest income. Differentiated higher margin fares, right? Getting people to opt out of the competitive landscape entirely. The aggregators are fantastic, and I love Expedia and the other aggregators. But if you look at what's happening on or within those experiences, you're watching commoditization happen in real time. Are there ways, again, that we can get people to opt out of the competitive landscape? Optimized cabin architectures, which I showed you with the Fedora bins. Far faster turn times. A 71% improvement in boarding process is massive. And it's mainly prevented currently because of how we're treating bags. And the last is co-making revenue. The only thing I'll say about co-making revenue in particular is that the paradigm in the sports apparel industry a couple years ago used to be that sports teams purchased gear from Nike and Adidas and Converse and so forth. That paradigm has been flipped on its head to the point now where those gear makers pay sports teams hundreds of millions of dollars per year for the privilege of equipping them with that gear. That same opportunity exists for us if we do things like the promotional middle seat, where we invite partners to co-make with us, and then we generate co-making revenue from them. So, happier passengers and happier bottom lines. But importantly, what will it take to really do these things? And this is my closing remarks. In the future, the airline of the future, if you will be a software company. We will have to embrace code as the way we create differentiated experiences. It's not a coincidence that Uber's full legal name is Uber Technologies. Uber does not own a car. They don't own a single car. They have changed an entire category through code. The same opportunity exists for us. The airline of the future will also be a lifestyle brand. Passengers clearly want this from us. We need to step up to the plate to deliver on this. And lastly, the airline of the future will absolutely be a member-focused business. This does not mean we transition to flying clubs. This means that we layer membership over our existing business models to deliver on the benefits I mentioned earlier. And with that, thank you.
Devin, thank you very much. If I can just introduce a slightly sceptical view of this, because you started by saying loyalty is a myth when it comes to airlines. I think you said the top two, they're outside the top 200 brands in the world. I could argue with you that it's the nature of the beast. Ultimately, they're carriers. Very few airlines take you everywhere in the world. Therefore, loyalty is quite hard in that sense because, if I want to go somewhere and that airline doesn't take me there, I'm not going to use that airline.
Sure.
Can we just accept the fact that, I don't think that, for instance, a train line, I don't have loyalty to a train line or a coach company or whatever. And maybe we should just accept that is what airlines are about.
Well, I would, not to sound contrarian, but I would completely reject that proposition. I would think that if we were to do that, if we were to accept these, what I would argue as self-induced limitations, we are simply leaving money on the table. And I can be very, very sort of accounting-centric about this as well. Brands that are loved are not only more preferred, brands that are loved earn higher margins than those who are not loved. So it is in our interests to be loved, right? Whatever our inspiration for being loved, there is very clearly a pot of gold at the end of that, if you will. And that's really what it comes down in terms of why we should do that. So I would reject some of the limitations that we put on that.
But in terms of the network, if you like, into where the airline can actually go, it almost suggests to me that it's the alliance that actually could be branded more strongly. You have a loyalty to the alliance. In other words, Delta and Virgin, for example, or,
right.
It's the whole package, not the individual airline.
Could be, and I think actually the other thing that's maybe at work and what we've seen, and people who we've shown this to have brought this up, is that it actually maybe presents an opportunity for an entirely new party within air travel, which is basically an operating company. So we have leasing companies and we have airlines, but is there also room for an operating company that would take on the burden of all that code development I mentioned, and then leaves the brand as sort of the touch point, the final touch point, if you will, which would actually open the door for other brands to participate in commercial aviation that aren't currently participating.
Okay, there's some stimulating points there, and are there any questions from the audience? Anything that you strongly disagree with?
One in the back
There's one there. Great, very good.
Hey, Devin, thanks very much for an awesome presentation. I completely agree with you on a lot of these points. I also think that you presented a lot of very provocative solutions for across many different passenger touch points. Excellent. So besides giving you the feedback, I just wanted to ask you, would you agree that a really good way to challenge the airlines to actually tie up a lot of these solutions into a meaningful and a comprehensive overhaul of the passenger experience, wouldn't you say that a good vehicle to do that would actually just be a top-to-bottom redo of the way that people think of loyalty programs nowadays?
Wow, yeah, well, yes, I actually do agree with you. I think loyalty programs will not be our future either. I think that they, as I said earlier, that there's, or at least they should be renamed. Maybe that's the other way to say that. They actually are not about loyalty. As a total aside, there actually are plenty of scenarios where loyalty programs aren't effective at all. They are effective for a lot of things, but a good example of where they aren't effective is actually in travel on the Eastern Seaboard. Loyalty programs are almost entirely ineffectual on the Eastern Seaboard because you can never earn enough miles flying between Boston and Philadelphia to get that family vacation you want to Paris, right? It just simply will never happen. So people just move from fare to fare to fare based on what is the lowest price. So I think what we've tried to do here from a provocation, if you will, about membership is in many ways to the heart of your question, which is, can we use membership to supplant loyalty programs in general and think about them in a more meaningful and enriching way. So that's absolutely what we're after there.
Absolutely. And how long do you think it will go until the very first couple of airlines actually take that radical step to start thinking of membership rather than loyalty?
Well, encouragingly, actually, I know there are airlines today that are already exploring membership models. I know Air Canada, as one, has a membership model that they are exploring. So I think the future is starting earlier than we think, and certainly what we've seen with other categories, it's present, right, more than future. So I think it's actually going to be within the next year or two, to be honest.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Forgive me for peering, but the light's in your eyes.
Oh, right here.
Yep, very good.
Hi. You put a lot of things up on the screen talking about ancillary revenue and reducing weight on the aircraft and reducing turn times. What of that is good for the passenger as opposed to being good for the airline?
No, it's a great question, and actually the posture that I would assert happens right now when it comes to ancillary revenue is that ancillary revenue currently is structured mostly as a take. We are taking value from passengers. Yes, they mostly sort of begrudgingly accept it, right? But for checking a bag, an actual passenger doesn't get anything out of that. So what we're trying to do from a Poppy standpoint with these scenarios is, are there ways that we actually can add value, to the heart of your question, add value rather than simply just take value, right? So the idea of click class is a way to add value. I mean, the idea of partnering with a hotel to distribute your bag straight to your room is the idea of adding value. So that's what we're after there.
I guess I'm trying to understand what the value add is of not letting me have my stuff on the airplane.
Yes, well, the stuff that you need to have on board the airplane still should absolutely go with you. Now, your shoes and socks and underwear and sombrero and so forth, all that stuff, right, that you're bringing back, they don't need to be on board the aircraft, right? And you're right, there's a balancing act to be made there. But I would pause before I ever thought that someone got a lot of value about having their roll-aboard bag on board the aircraft other than sidestepping the fear that we'll lose it. That's primarily what's happening. I mean, there's scenarios where people want to have it with them, but having the bag in the bin by itself is not necessarily the experience that people want out of that.
Okay, thank you. Time for one last question, if there is one.
I think there was one here.
Your eyesight must be better than mine in the dark. Yes, please.
My question is related to the cabin, the experience, particularly for business travel, that you are going for a short duration, and personally, I and other people would have lost their luggage and not be in a shape for the next day at the work.
Right.
I lost once going to Toulouse. It has been 9 years. I carry on one suit with me, no matter it's a direct flight or a connection. So probably having all the other ends of that business covered, that there will be assurance from the hotel or the location you are going, or from the airline or from the airport authority, that your luggage will definitely make it to your final destination.
Yep.
It will take a lot of time to remove the cabin baggage, even if it is small overnighter or some small stuff. But people will carry. Just sharing that. So at least the way we see it, or I see it from my end, it will take a lot of time before you can remove the cabin baggage.
It's about
Fair
trust.
enough.
It's about whether the customer actually trusts in that process.
Yeah, and I think the word you used is the right one, which is assurance. How do we, from a system standpoint, offer assurance that the bag is absolutely where it needs to be within the journey it's taking as well? So, but I will say in defense that those technologies exist right now. RFID technologies exist right now. Airlines, as an aside, spend millions of dollars per year on thermal paper. We should have all moved to RFID-enabled tags a long time ago, and yet many of us remain using thermal paper. So, but that RFID tag is all about assurance.
Okay. Devin, thank you so
Thank you.
much. I suspect later on this evening, maybe with a few drinks, you can probably harangue him.
And we'll argue about it. Yeah, I'd love to.
And see if his vision of the future really stands up to scrutiny, which I might join in as well. Thank you, Devin.
Thanks so much.
No way.